going to read from Matthew chapter 8, beginning at verse 23. And when he got into the boat, his disciples followed him. A gale arose on the lake, so great that the boat was being swamped by the waves, but he was asleep. And they went and woke him up, saying, Lord, save us, we are perishing. And he said to them, Why are you afraid, you of little faith? Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a dead calm. They were amazed, saying, What sort of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him? In August of 2016, our family had some issues. I was serving as pastor at Mississippi City United Methodist Church in Gulfport. We had discerned that our neighborhood had a large number of single-parent families, mostly headed by women, that were below the median income for Gulfport and Harrison County, while we were a mostly older congregation. And we were seeking to discover how we could reach out to our neighborhood. We had just concluded a vacation Bible school where some of the children and parents from the neighborhood had responded to our efforts to reach out. My wife, Lynette, was serving as an associate pastor at St. Paul United Methodist Church in Ocean Springs. This is a large church. In fact, it's a two-campus church, downtown and east campus. And there were tensions at that church, tensions between east campus attendees and downtown campus attendees, tensions within the staff, tensions within the two groups that had gone back for a while, both because the planned sale of the downtown campus had not gone through. And so there was a mortgage on the newly built downtown, the newly built East Campus, and questions over resources and priorities and staff priorities. And she spent a lot of time in conversation within the staff, in conversation with people in both campuses and in all the factions, in conversation in committees where decisions were hard to come up with, in conversation with the staff around staff tensions, in conversation with me, in conversation with God. Some of you have met my son Luke. He's an adult with an autism spectrum disorder. He had been working at Goodwill in Gulfport, but they had asked him to go home and not come back because he wants to do things his way. If you were with him on moving day, you know he wants everything done his way, and he wants to be in charge. He doesn't always know what needs to happen if he's in charge, but he still wants to be in charge. And he wanted to be in charge at work, and they didn't think he needed to be. So they had asked him to go home. So we had some stuff going on. Also, Lynette's car had its transmission go out. And if you've ever had a transmission go out on a car, you may have wondered, why not just buy a new car? Because replacing a transmission is expensive. In fact, on Friday, the 19th of August, I had just followed a tow truck to a transmission shop where Lynette's car was going to be looked at. They were going to get back with me with an estimate. And I got home, and there was enough of the day left that I asked, maybe we can go to a movie. And Lynette said, I've got some kind of problem with my left breast. I think it's an abscess. She had gone to Dr. Internet to diagnose herself. She said, I think we need to go to the doctor. So off we went to the Memorial Walk-In Clinic near our home. And the nurse practitioner got a look at her breast. And she said, you need to go to the emergency room. So off we went to the Gulfport Memorial emergency room, which was easier to get into and less daunting in 2016 when there wasn't a global pandemic going on. They got us back to a room pretty quick, did the usual intake, and the emergency room doctor came in. And he took a look at her breast, and I got the first chance to look, and it looked really bad. And he said, I'm going to have to consult a surgeon. I'm going to admit you. So she was admitted. The next morning, Saturday the 20th, the surgeon came in, and he looked. And he said, I don't think that's an abscess. I think it's inflammatory breast cancer. He poked around and he said, does this hurt? She said, no, it doesn't hurt. He said, if it was an abscess, it would really hurt when I do this. But we'll go in and take a look. So there I was on Saturday morning in the surgical waiting room by myself. And he found me and said, I really hoped it was an abscess, but it's not. It's inflammatory breast cancer, and it's too far advanced for me to operate. Somehow I made my way back to her room. And then I could hear shrieking going on. I looked around and there was nobody else in the room, which meant the shrieking I was hearing was coming from me. Lots and lots of shrieking. The nurses came down to see what was going on. I just waved them off. Lynette's friend Elizabeth came by, and I managed to choke out the words, inflammatory breast cancer, and kept on shrieking. Lynette came back to the room. I got the opportunity to tell her what it was. Luke and Sarah, my daughter Sarah, came up. Sarah already knew that inflammatory breast cancer was a possibility. We didn't really know what we were going to do about telling Luke. He, as you know, has autism spectrum disorder. We didn't know what his response was going to be. We thought there might be shrieking and running up and down the hallways. So all I did was just nod at Sarah so she would know what was going on. The next morning, we met an oncologist. She came in and said, "This is a very aggressive cancer. We're going to be aggressive in addressing it. We're going to start chemotherapy. While you're here, I want you to have a port inserted for chemotherapy. We'll begin as soon as we can after you're discharged." Millsap's classes were supposed to begin on Monday the 21st. Sarah needed to leave. She, as I understand, only made it halfway to Jackson that day. She had the port inserted. I got a call from the transmission shop wanting to give me the estimate. And I said, "You know, my wife was just diagnosed with breast cancer. We've got some other things on our plate now." And he said, "Okay." Chemo began on that Thursday, 6 days after we first went to the doctor. Luke was going to a drop-in center in Gulfport. I got Lynette up to the infusion center and then came back to get him to the drop-in center. I said, "They're giving Mama some more medicine." He went on to the drop-in center. I went back to the infusion center, sitting outside because you couldn't go into the infusion center because there were other patients in there and they deserved their privacy. Chemo wasn't over when I needed to go back and get Luke. And I told him again, "They're giving Mama some more medicine." He said, "What kind of medicine?" I said, "Chemotherapy." "Does Mama have cancer?" He didn't shriek. She was at home, but he didn't shriek. That fall, we went every 3 weeks for powerful chemotherapy. One Saturday, I went to the grocery store 6 times trying to find food that Lynette could eat. We'd have chemo. The next week, we'd have a doctor's appointment. We'd have blood tests. Every now and then, we'd have scans. And the doctor said, "I see some shrinkage. The inflammation is going down, but this is a very aggressive cancer." My head wasn't processing this information. The end of the year, we finished chemo. She took a look at the scans and said, "I see a little bit of shrinkage, and the labs have improved a little bit. I'm going to switch you to a different kind of chemotherapy, pills this time." And Lynette said, "What we're doing is trying to keep me here as long as possible, right?" She said, "Yes." We were in Gulfport. Lynette, Luke, me, and the dog. Lynette's sisters live in Winona and Iuka. Sarah was in school in Jackson. I thought, this next year is not going to go well This next conference year is not going to go well with me, Lynette, Luke, and the dog down here in Gulfport. So I asked to be moved closer to Jackson. And I was appointed to Harrisville, which is about 30 miles south of Jackson in Simpson County. We switched doctors to the UMMC Cancer Institute, where they began yet another kind of chemotherapy and radiation. We got to know the road from Harrisville to the UMMC Cancer Institute at the Medical Mall really well. Radiation is 5 days a week. At the end of that time, her new doctor said, we have given you everything we have to offer. MD Anderson is always doing clinical trials. Maybe you can see if you can qualify for one of those. This is a very aggressive cancer. So in early October, we went to Houston. More blood tests, more scans. We met Dr. Bora Lim, a researcher in inflammatory breast cancer. She said, I think we've got a trial that you would qualify for. It will involve monthly chemotherapy here in Houston and an experimental drug. We had to think about that. Went back to Houston at the end of October. We were in Houston the day the Astros won the World Series. That was a first for me. No, more tests, more scans. This time the scan showed two things. One was that fluid was accumulating on Lynette's left lung. So we got to have a consult with a pulmonary doctor. And there was a spot on her brain. So we had a consult with a neurosurgeon and a radiation oncologist. They were going to do radiosurgery on that spot on her brain. They'd put a crown or a halo on her head. I thought she always deserved a crown. A halo on her head to let the precise beam of radiation go to that spot. The oncologist drained the fluid from her lung and then put in a drain that would allow us to keep draining the fluid from her lung to improve her breathing. We went back to Houston a third time, this time for the radiosurgery. When I say I took Lynette places, what I mean is she drove and I rode along with her. She liked to be in control. She'd say, honey, that car a half mile ahead is putting on his brakes. You better put on your brakes. Yes, I see it. Well, after the radiosurgery, she couldn't drive anymore. I drove home from Houston. She had driven to and from Houston twice and to Houston another time. Now it was me that was driving. Thanksgiving, the day before Thanksgiving of 2017, we had a discussion. Our discussion was, when do we need to put the turkey in the roaster oven? And when are we going to watch the WKRP in Cincinnati episode Turkeys Away? Thanksgiving morning, she woke me up. Said, I'm really having trouble breathing. She had just had that drain the fluid the day before, but she said, I'm having trouble breathing. I need to go to the emergency room. They had told us at UMMC, don't come to our emergency room. It's not safe for someone with cancer. So I put her in the car. You don't call an ambulance in Harrisville because the ambulance has to come from Jackson to take you back to Jackson. So it's better to drive if you can. So I put her in the car and we went to the Baptist emergency room. They, again, not that hazardous. They got her back to her room pretty fast and admitted her. Sarah's senior voice recital was Monday, November 27th. This was Thursday, the Thursday before. Lynette's sister brought the food she was going to serve for Thanksgiving dinner at her home down to Jackson. We had Thanksgiving dinner in a hospital room. Our focus for the rest of the weekend was getting Lynette out of the hospital so she could make it to Sarah's senior voice recital. Our goal at the beginning of the school year had been, let's make it to May 5th. Sarah's graduation was May 5th. Can we make it to May 5th? By supreme effort and supplemental oxygen and the use of a wheelchair, we got Lynette to Sarah's voice recital on November 27th. That, I think, was Sarah's graduation. That was her real graduation. We went home, Lynette did some physical therapy, some occupational therapy. They had told us at MD Anderson she needs to be at this baseline for us to start this chemotherapy. We thought we'd had a setback, but we were determined we were going to try to strengthen her enough that we could go back to MD Anderson at the beginning of the year. On Saturday, December 2nd, Lynette was sitting in her wheelchair and she was punching her iPad. And I said, what are you doing? She said, I need to find the 2. What? No, the 2. I need to find the 2. I had no idea what she was talking about. That's all she could say is, I need to find the 2. We called the home health nurse. They say always call the home health nurse first. We called the home health nurse. Told her what was happening, and she said, take her to the emergency room. Back we went to the Baptist emergency room. Sarah was in a separate car, the car with a new $2,700 transmission in it. And she got stopped, and she didn't have her driver's license with her. She told the officer, my mama's on the way to the emergency room, I'm trying to catch up. He let her go. We got to the Baptist emergency room, again went right on back, and then we found out that there was no neurologist on call. And UMMC was full. Even when there's not a global pandemic, sometimes the hospitals are full. So she was moved to St. Dominic's, where there was a neurologist on call, which began the worst week of my life. Sarah was trying to finish exams. Lynette was agitated, confused, fighting against some of the lines that were in her. Luke has never spent the night alone. When we were gone to Houston, his aunts came and stayed with him in Harrisville. He had said, "Daddy, when are we going to Houston?" And I said, "We are not going to Houston. Mama and I are going to Houston." So I was going back to Harrisville to spend the night with him and the dog. And Lynette was agitated. We called in what one of Sarah's friends called the Army of Ladies. Her friends, people she'd known and been connected to for a long time. They were the army of ladies who would come and sit with her when I couldn't. When Sarah was back at Millsaps trying to take exams and finish up papers. The army of ladies became a blessing to us. On that Friday, the 8th, Lynette had a scan, another scan, always having scans. And this scan involved her laying flat on her back. When she came back up to the room, her oxygen saturation was 70. That's bad, if you didn't know. Needs to be over 90. And then she was having a hard time even with the supplemental oxygen, and they turned to me and said, "If we can't get this under control, do you want us to put her on a ventilator?" I had been a hospital chaplain for 8 years. I'd been a hospice chaplain for 7 years beyond that. I had, at that time, been a pastor for 31 years. I had been studying for this test for a long time. And I knew the answer. But the answer wasn't anything I wanted. All I could do was shake my head, no. No ventilator. Once she was back a little bit lucid, or fairly lucid actually, I said, "Lynette, this is not working." Another oncologist came in and said, "This is a very aggressive cancer." Finally, my brain and my decision making and my heart got connected. I said, "Lynette, I think we're going to have to go on hospice." And she said, "I think you're right." Which moved us to telling the children. They came in. I said, "We're going to need to put Mama on hospice." Luke said, "Is Mama dying?" Then there was shrieking. It was coming from him this time. It was an appropriate time for shrieking. We got the hospice admission nurse in on Saturday. It was important to me that Lynette sign the permission, the consent to hospice admission, which she did. Got the house ready for a hospital bed. Sunday afternoon, I did not drive her home. She came home by ambulance. got her set up. That Sunday night, she called me once in the night to help her with something that I could help with. Monday, the 11th, was a good day. We had several folks from different churches come by to visit and bring food. She was, as always, pleasant, caring for the folks who came in. We met the hospice social worker, the hospice nurse who would be caring for her, was completing her admission, the home health aide who would come and bathe her 5 days a week. I was playing my playlist of famous Christmas songs written and performed by Jews. Luke was very happy to have her home. He sat by her bed and told her about video games and television shows and movies. She was always his favorite audience. When he talks to me about those things, after a while I'll say, Luke, I don't want to hear more about that. But she always listened, seemed interested. I'm sure she wasn't, but she was interested in him. That night we watched our favorite show, The Good Doctor, about a surgical resident who has autism spectrum disorder. We thought somebody had been following us around with a tape recorder because Sean and Luke say so many of the same things. I kissed her goodnight, told her I loved her. She said the same. Went to bed. I was just 100 feet or so from her. The next morning, she didn't call me in the night. I thought, well, she's had a good night, sleep. Got up and looked, and she appeared to be asleep. I thought, well, that's good for her. About an hour later, I heard the worst sentence I've ever heard in my life. Daddy, I can't wake Mama up. It appears we're drowning. It appears that the waves have come over the boat and won't stop. I said, it's too soon. It wouldn't have mattered when it happened. It was too soon. It had been 35 years, but it was too soon. If it had been 50 years or 60 years, it would have been too soon. But we didn't drown. The army of ladies came as gifts from God to keep us from drowning. God gave intelligence to doctors and nurses to learn how to address illnesses, and gave them the kindness to be a part of that profession. Clergy friends held us up. Church people brought food and caps and wraps and clothes. We were in a storm. 16 months of a storm. But we heard through it all. Peace, be still. Peace that doesn't ignore the storm. The storm is real. But I'm here. I haven't left you alone. Peace.